Berlin, January 1874. The German Empire's postmaster, General Heinrich von Stephan, takes the stage to deliver a lecture titled World Postal Service and Air Travel.
Eines Tages wird die Post nicht nur zu Land und zu Wasser, sondern auch durch den Himmel befördert werden. Mit fliegenden Schiffen werden Briefe zwischen den Kontinenten innerhalb weniger Tage ihr Ziel erreichen.
The continents are already being bound together by post and telegraph, yet something is missing. The sky. Land and sea are connected, but the heavens remain empty. Some call this idea madness, others a dream. Among the audience sits a man in military uniform, quietly taking notes. Stephan's words ignite something within him, a spark of vision.
Eines Tages wird die Post nicht nur zu Land und zu Wasser, sondern auch durch den Himmel befördert werden.
A machine that will connect continents, ease travel, and carry messages. A flying ship. He bends over his notebook, sketching a long, slender body, an internal framework divided into sections, a small rudder at the tail. As Stephan continues speaking, the officer's eyes are no longer on the stage, but fixed on his sketch. When he returns from the conference, he writes in his journal, "The sky must be mankind's next destination." That man was none other than Ferdinand von Zeppelin. The flying ship he envisioned would soon evolve into colossal air vessels filling the skies of the world, Zeppelins, named after their creator. For years, they would soar above nations as symbols of human ambition, only to meet their end in a tragedy of equal grandeur. Yet Zeppelin's dream of flight had taken root long before that conference. As a young officer in the Württemberg army, Ferdinand was sent as an observer to the United States during the Civil War. There, he visited an army balloon camp and met the German-born aeronaut John Steiner. In August 1863, in the city of St. Paul, Zeppelin took his first ascent in a balloon under Steiner's guidance. The experience left a deep impression on him. He began to dream of a more controlled, purposeful vehicle for air travel. He later served with distinction in the Franco-Prussian War 1870 to 1871, earning recognition for his bravery. But after several disagreements within the army, he retired in 1890. From that moment on, he devoted himself entirely to his flying ship. By 1893, he had completed detailed designs. By 1895, he secured a German patent, and in 1899, an American one. His concept was revolutionary, a rigid airship supported by a lightweight internal frame, divided into multiple gas cells filled with hydrogen. Although Count Zeppelin struggled to secure state funding, he refused to abandon his dream. In 1898, he founded the Society for the Development of Air Navigation, raising 800,000 marks, more than half from his own fortune. To build his first airship, a floating hangar was constructed on Lake Constance Bodensee near Friedrichshafen, allowing the massive vessel to be aligned with the wind for safe entry and launch. The first Zeppelin, LZ-1, was finally completed, 128 meters long, holding 11,000 cubic meters of hydrogen, and powered by two 15-horsepower Daimler engines driving propellers mounted beneath its gondolas. On July 2nd, 1900, Count Zeppelin's first airship lifted off from Lake Constance, rising majestically before a captivated crowd. The test flight was brief but successful, though the craft sustained minor damage upon landing. After repairs, LZ-1 made two more flights in October 1900, surpassing the French La France airship speed record. Despite these successes, investors were not satisfied. Funding dried up, the company was dissolved. Yet the dream once launched into the skies, would never truly come down. The inventor, who refused to give up, began searching for new sources of funding. He mortgaged his wife's property, organized a lottery, and called on the public for donations. With the money raised, LZ-2 was built in 1906, but it managed only a single test flight. After a motor failure forced an emergency landing in the Allgäu Alps, a violent storm struck and severely damaged the craft. Undeterred, Zeppelin and his team salvaged what they could from the wreckage and used the surviving parts to build a new airship, LZ-3. This time, success finally arrived. LZ-3 became the first fully functional Zeppelin and reignited the German army's interest in the project. The military set a bold condition for purchase: an airship that could stay aloft for 24 hours. To meet that challenge, a new model was built, LZ-4. In July of that year, LZ-4 made a 12-hour flight to Zurich and back, an impressive feat for its time. Encouraged, Zeppelin prepared for the ambitious 24-hour endurance trial. But fate intervened. A technical malfunction forced LZ-4 to land near Echterdingen, close to Stuttgart. As the ship lay tethered to the ground, a sudden storm tore it free from its moorings. The massive airship drifted, struck a tree, and burst into flames. There were no serious casualties. But LZ-4's daring flights had already captured the imagination of the German people. Its destruction sparked not despair, but a nationwide wave of support. Across the empire, citizens contributed to a massive fundraising campaign, one personally endorsed by Kaiser Wilhelm II. Within weeks, an extraordinary 6 million marks had been raised. Only a short time earlier, Zeppelin had been on the verge of abandoning his dream. Now he possessed the means to bring it roaring back to life. By the end of 1908, with this newfound backing, Zeppelin founded Zeppelin Construction Company. In 1909, Count Zeppelin established the world's first airline, German Airship Travel Corporation. Its goal was not yet regular scheduled service, but a series of passenger flights that would bring the wonder of air travel to the public. After selling LZ-3 to the army, the company introduced new models such as LZ-6 and LZ-7 Deutschland. These majestic airships carried a few dozen passengers on sightseeing tours between German cities, letting people experience the skies for the first time. Between 1909 and 1914, Delag's Zeppelins completed over 1,500 flights, carrying more than 10,000 passengers, an extraordinary achievement at a time when fixed-wing airplanes were still in their infancy. Yet progress was not without setbacks. As the technology evolved, several accidents darkened the skies of Zeppelin optimism. In 1910, LZ-6 exploded in a hangar fire during maintenance. Later that year, LZ-7 Deutschland, on a promotional flight carrying 19 journalists, was caught in a storm and suffered engine failure, forcing a crash landing near Bad Iburg in Lower Saxony. The ship was destroyed, but all aboard miraculously survived. Its successor, LZ-8 Deutschland II, was no luckier. In 1911, during its rollout from the hangar, a sudden gust of wind smashed the airship against the ground, leaving it irreparably damaged. These mishaps began to shake public confidence until LZ-10 Schwaben came to the rescue. Launched in 1911, Schwaben quickly earned a reputation for reliability. Over 218 passenger flights, it carried 1,553 travelers who delighted in gliding through the clouds and gazing down at the landscape below. Zeppelin travel had become a symbol of luxury and adventure for the wealthy and the daring alike. Meanwhile, the German Army and Navy were beginning to see strategic value in these floating giants. Both branches began experimenting with Zeppelins for military use. The Navy soon followed, placing its first order in 1912. But tragedy would strike again. In September 1913, the Navy's L-1 Zeppelin was caught in a storm and crashed into the sea near Helgoland, drowning 14 sailors. Barely a month later, the newly delivered Zeppelin L-2, caught fire during a test flight, killing all 28 crew members on board. The dream of conquering the skies was proving to be as perilous as it was inspiring. Though these accidents left the German Navy short of experienced Zeppelin personnel, neither the Army nor the Navy lost faith. In early 1914, the Zeppelin Company began manufacturing larger and more advanced airships for the Navy and Army. Yet that same year, the course of the world and of the Zeppelin was about to change forever. When the First World War broke out, the German Empire was among the first nations to enter the conflict. At the outbreak of war, all civilian Zeppelins were requisitioned by the military. Naval Zeppelins were used mainly for patrol and reconnaissance over the seas, while Army Zeppelins were tasked with strategic bombing operations. Since airplanes of the time were primitive and had limited range, the Zeppelins, able to climb thousands of meters into the sky, offered Germany an effective means of long-range aerial warfare. During the early years of the war, night raids on distant targets such as London spread terror among civilians and struck a heavy psychological blow to enemy morale. German Zeppelins were carrying out regular bombing raids over Britain. At first, Kaiser Wilhelm forbade direct attacks on London, but this restriction was later lifted. In total, 56 Zeppelin raids on Britain left more than 500 people dead and caused widespread damage. Initially, the so-called Zeppelin terror was celebrated in the German press as a triumph of modern warfare, an awe-inspiring new form of battle in which vast airships drifted silently through the night, raining destruction from above. Yet their weaknesses soon became apparent. Slow, enormous, and highly flammable, Zeppelins were easy targets for ground artillery and the newly developed anti-aircraft guns. One of the first such tragedies came early in the war during a bombing raid over Liège. The Z-4 was forced to descend below the clouds. Hit by small arms fire from the ground, the damaged airship limped back as far as Bonn, where its crew scuttled and destroyed it. Another infamous incident occurred over London in October 1916, when a formation of Zeppelins was intercepted by British fighter aircraft. The L-31, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Heinrich Matthey, was set ablaze and crashed in a ball of fire before the horrified eyes of Londoners below. The German people had considered Zeppelins invincible until then. By the end of World War I, Germany's defeat marked a decisive turning point in the history of the Zeppelin. Under the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the country was forced to surrender its remaining airships to the Allies, and further Zeppelin construction was strictly forbidden. But the age of the Zeppelin had come to a standstill. The once proud giants that had filled German skies were gone, replaced by silence and despair. To survive the post-war years, the Zeppelin Company turned to producing aluminum cookware and household goods, a far cry from their former glory. Yet this was merely the calm before the storm. The airships would soon return, not as instruments of war, but as ambassadors of peace. Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin did not live to witness this revival. He passed away in 1917, but his legacy endured in the hands of his spiritual successor, Dr. Hugo Eckener, a man determined to continue the dream in a new era. Eckener envisioned Zeppelins soaring peacefully over nations, linking cities and people rather than bombing them. Despite Germany's shattered economy and the severe restrictions of Versailles, he refused to abandon the vision. In 1919, using whatever resources remained, his team constructed a smaller passenger airship, the LZ-120, known as Bodensee. It made its maiden flight that August, operating briefly between Friedrichshafen and Berlin as the first Zeppelin to provide regular passenger and mail service. Soon after, another ship, the LZ-121 Nordstern, was built for planned flights to Stockholm. But Allied pressure quickly ended this fragile rebirth. In 1921, the victors demanded both airships as war reparations, and further construction of large Zeppelins was banned outright. The blow nearly destroyed the company, yet it managed to survive. The true opportunity to rebuild came a few years later from an unexpected place: the United States. The US Navy, impressed by Germany's Pro-R airship technology, sought to acquire a large, rigid airship of its own. In 1924, Dr. Eckener negotiated an agreement to build one for the Americans. His solution to bypass the Versailles ban was ingenious. The new airship would count as part of Germany's war reparations and thus be legally permitted. Construction of the Zeppelin began with the approval of the German government. On August 27, 1924, it took its first flight. And on October 12 that same year, it embarked on a historic transatlantic journey from Germany to the United States. Commanded by Eckener himself, the airship completed the 8,000-kilometer voyage in 80 hours and 45 minutes, landing safely at Lakehurst Naval Air Station, New Jersey. The arrival was met with extraordinary enthusiasm. Americans hailed the Zeppelin as a messenger of peace. President Calvin Coolidge welcomed Eckener and his crew to the White House, honoring their achievement as a symbol of reconciliation. The ship was filled with helium instead of hydrogen and went on to serve reliably for 8 years, becoming the US Navy's most successful airship until 1932. This triumph rekindled hope among the engineers back in Friedrichshafen and signaled the dawn of a new era, the rebirth of the Zeppelin age, rising once again from the ashes of war. In 1926, the Allies relaxed their restrictions on Germany's production of airships. Hugo Eckener tirelessly traveled around Germany for 2 years seeking support for Zeppelins. He gave lectures and organized promotional tours. Eventually, through public donations and the backing of several investors, a new Super Zeppelin project came to life. The new airship would be named Graf Zeppelin, in honor of the Ferdinand von Zeppelin. When the Graf Zeppelin took its maiden flight on the 18th of September 1928, Germany once again had a giant of the skies. Measuring 236 meters in length and holding 105,000 cubic meters of gas, it was the largest airship ever built up to that point. Powered by 550 horsepower Maybach engines, its design prioritized safety, endurance, and comfort. To ensure the viability of commercial air travel by Zeppelin, Eckener planned to use the Graf as a demonstration and experimental vessel, undertaking long-distance voyages around the world to test its limits and prove the feasibility of carrying passengers and mail. The Graf Zeppelin's first great journey came in October 1928, when it crossed the Atlantic to the United States, inaugurating a new era of long-distance air travel. Taking off from Friedrichshafen on the 11th of October, the airship reached Lakehurst, New Jersey on the 15th of October after 111 hours, about 4.5 days in the air. Midway across the Atlantic, the Graf was caught in a fierce storm and narrowly avoided disaster. Under Captain Eckener's expert command, and with the crew's determined in-flight repairs, the airship survived, arriving safely over New York to a jubilant welcome. As it drifted among the city's skyscrapers, a shower of confetti rained down, parades were held in honor of the crew. And the image of the silver giant over Manhattan became a symbol of modern wonder. 1929 marked the peak of the Graf Zeppelin's fame. That August, Dr. Eckener embarked on a bold plan to fly the Zeppelin around the world. This flight plan became one of the most sensational journeys of the interwar period. American press magnate William Randolph Hearst helped finance the expedition in exchange for exclusive publishing rights in the United States and Britain, insisting that the official starting point be Lakehurst. On the 8th of August 1929, the Graf Zeppelin lifted off from there and flew via Friedrichshafen, Tokyo, and Los Angeles, before returning to Lakehurst and finally home to Germany. In just 21 days, it circumnavigated the globe, covering 49,618 kilometers and completing the first round-the-world flight by an airship. Newspapers followed its every move, and at each stop, thousands gathered to gaze skyward at the gleaming silver vessel. The Zeppelin had become more than a machine. It was an international cultural phenomenon. In the early 1930s, the Graf effectively established the world's first regular transatlantic air route. Beginning in 1930, it carried passengers and mail between Frankfurt and Brazil. Even through the Great Depression and rising competition from airplanes, the Graf Zeppelin continued to expand its service. By 1936, it had completed 590 flights, including 144 ocean crossings, covering more than 1.6 million kilometers, and not a single passenger had been injured. Zeppelin advertisements proudly displayed this flawless safety record, and deservedly so. Through countless storms and experimental missions, the Graf carried its passengers safely and won a special place in the public imagination. In 1931, the Graf ventured on a daring Arctic exploration mission, flying to the North Pole for scientific research, a dream once imagined by Count Zeppelin himself, but thwarted by war. These triumphs defined what came to be remembered as the golden age of the Zeppelins. By the early 1930s, the world was in the grip of Zeppelin mania. The name appeared on postage stamps, songs, souvenirs, and films. Technological progress marched on. Inspired by the Graf's success, the company began designing an even larger, more powerful ship, the LZ-128. Planned at 232 meters in length, with a capacity of nearly 200,000 cubic meters of hydrogen and 8 engines, it would have been a true ocean liner of the skies. But tragedy struck elsewhere. In October 1930, Britain's passenger airship R101 crashed in France, killing 48 people, the worst airship disaster to date. Deeply shaken, Eckner cancelled the LZ-128, recognizing the deadly volatility of hydrogen. To ensure the future of airship travel, he resolved to use helium, a non-flammable alternative. Thus, the LZ-128 was scrapped, and plans were redrawn from scratch. In 1933, when the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany, the Zeppelins suddenly found themselves transformed into instruments of state propaganda. Dr. Hugo Eckner was a staunch opponent of the Nazis and openly resisted using the airships for political purposes. But Joseph Goebbels quickly crushed his opposition. By 1936, Eckner had been forced out of public life, his name forbidden even to appear in newspapers. At the same time, the Nazi regime saw great value in the airships as symbols of German technological superiority. Goebbels' ministry allocated 2 million Reichsmarks to the construction of the new Zeppelin. And Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, established the German Zeppelin Shipping Company in 1935, a semi-civil aviation company placed under state control as a subsidiary of Lufthansa. This gave the regime full command over the Zeppelin's operations and routes. The great airships now bore swastika flags on their tails, gliding low over German cities during propaganda tours, while loudspeakers broadcast marches and speeches extolling the Führer. Meanwhile, construction of the LZ-129 was finally complete. The new airship was named Hindenburg in honor of Germany's aging president, Paul von Hindenburg. On the 4th of March 1936, the LZ-129 Hindenburg made its first test flight, instantly claiming the title of the largest aircraft ever built. This vehicle, which was 245 meters long and powered by 4 very powerful diesel engines, could reach a maximum speed of 135 kilometers per hour. The Hindenburg had been designed to use helium, a non-flammable lifting gas, but the United States, which held a near monopoly on global helium production, refused to export it to Nazi Germany for strategic reasons. Forced to adapt, the ship was filled with hydrogen, highly flammable but cheaper and more readily available. The Hindenburg's design reflected modern luxury. For the first time, passenger cabins were built within the hull itself, featuring heated lounges, comfortable cabins, and even a pressurized smoking room, a remarkable innovation considering the hydrogen-filled structure surrounding it. Open flames were strictly forbidden, but passengers were allowed to light cigars and cigarettes using a fixed electric lighter. With these amenities, the Hindenburg promised an unmatched level of comfort for transatlantic travelers. The year 1936 marked the ship's debut season and the peak of the Zeppelin era. Though the aging Graf Zeppelin still operated alongside it, the Hindenburg became the star of the fleet. During the 1936 season, it completed 10 round trips between Germany and the United States, carrying a total of 1,002 passengers, in addition to several special flights to Brazil. The Hindenburg's guest lists included celebrities, journalists, and even high-ranking Nazi officials. On board, passengers dined with silver cutlery, listening to piano music as they looked out through the long panoramic windows at the clouds and the Atlantic below. Zeppelin travel was not about speed, it was about grandeur and serenity. Averaging around 125 kilometers per hour, it was slower than piston-powered airplanes of the time, but infinitely more elegant. In those years, humanity's faith in the future of the Zeppelin was absolute. The Empire State Building in New York even featured a mooring mast designed for airships to dock, though fierce city winds soon rendered the idea impractical. Still, the very notion reflected the world's optimism. People truly believed these flying ships represented the future of global travel. As the Hindenburg shuttled back and forth across the Atlantic in 1936, it also served propaganda duties. Before the opening of the Berlin Olympic Games, it performed low-altitude flights over German cities, displaying Nazi banners and broadcasting patriotic anthems from the air. Dr. Eckener, though still alive, could do nothing to stop it. His deepest fear, however, was that this enormous hydrogen-filled craft might one day meet disaster, and that fear would soon come tragically true. In the spring of 1937, the Hindenburg was preparing for its new transatlantic season. On the 3rd of May 1937, it departed from Frankfurt, carrying 36 passengers and 61 crew members on yet another voyage to the United States. The crossing went smoothly. 3 uneventful days over the Atlantic. Then, on the evening of the 6th of May 1937, at around 7 p.m. local time, the airship arrived at the Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey to make its landing. Light rain was falling, but there was no storm. The ground crew received the mooring lines as the Hindenburg slowly descended, everything proceeding according to plan until the final seconds.
It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It's burst into flames. Get it started, get it started. It's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please. It's burning and bursting into flames and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between it. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's like 400 or 500 feet into the sky, and it's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it. I can't talk to people whose friends are on there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just laying down massive smoking wreckage. And everybody can hardly breathe and talk and screaming. Lady, I'm sorry. Honestly, I can hardly breathe. I'm going to step inside where I cannot see it. Charlie, that's terrible. Listen, folks, I'm going to have to stop for a minute because I've lost the voice. This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed.
The Hindenburg suddenly turned into an inferno before the eyes of the entire world. A flame appeared near the airship's tail, close to the rudders. Within seconds, yellowish red fire spread rapidly across the upper section of the ship. Everything happened so abruptly that even eyewitness accounts were inconsistent. Some claimed they first saw the fire on the upper part near the tail, while others insisted it started below. Yet one thing was certain. Once the hydrogen gas ignited, there was no turning back. Humanity witnessed one of the most unforgettable and harrowing sights in history. The colossal 245-meter airship, engulfed in crimson flames, plunged to the ground like a blazing torch. From this moment, the story shifts from the triumph of human flight to one of its darkest hours. Newsreel cameras were already rolling, capturing what became the first air disaster ever recorded live on film. At the same time, Herbert Morrison, a radio reporter from Chicago, was on site with a portable recorder, narrating what was meant to be a routine landing. When the Zeppelins suddenly caught fire, his voice broke into panic and disbelief. His anguished cry, "Oh, the humanity," would become immortal. Morrison's trembling, grief-stricken commentary was broadcast the next day across the United States, allowing millions to feel as though they had stood beneath that inferno themselves. The wreckage on the ground was a scene of utter devastation. Some passengers and crew leapt from the gondolas in the final seconds before impact. Others were thrown clear of the flaming framework. The toll was heavy. Of the 36 passengers, 13 died, along with 22 of the 61 crew members. One ground crewman, caught under the falling debris, was also killed, bringing the total to 36 dead. Miraculously, most aboard survived. Because the ship fell from a relatively low altitude and part of its structure cushioned the impact, many managed to escape before the flames consumed the hull. Those who perished died either from burns or from the desperate jump to the ground. Survivors emerged badly burned, many carrying scars for life. As the Hindenburg burned before the eyes of the world, the myth of safe, luxurious airship travel was destroyed along with it. An immediate investigation began, led jointly by Colonel South Trimble Jr. of the US Commerce Department and a German delegation under Dr. Hugo Eckener. Their findings could not pinpoint a single cause, but the most probable explanation emerged: a static electric discharge ignited leaking hydrogen gas during landing in the damp air, sparking the catastrophic fire. Witnesses reported hearing a dull explosion near the tail just before the blaze erupted, suggesting a sudden flash ignition of hydrogen. Alternative theories, including sabotage, circulated widely, but were never substantiated. The official report concluded that the tragedy was an accident, a convergence of weather, material weakness, and fatal chance. The media impact was immediate and immense. The next morning's newspapers splashed photographs of the blazing Zeppelin across front pages worldwide. Newsreel footage shown in cinemas left audiences gasping. Public confidence in airships collapsed overnight. Once hailed as the pinnacle of modern engineering and the embodiment of safe luxury, Zeppelins were now viewed as flying bombs. The destruction of the Hindenburg marked the end of the giant passenger airship era. The date the 6th of May 1937, when the Hindenburg fell at Lakehurst, became the final curtain of the Zeppelin age. Within a month, the venerable Graf Zeppelin was retired and placed in a hangar as a museum piece. In Germany, public attempts to fund a revival, like the 1908 campaign after the LZ-4 disaster, were forbidden by the Nazi regime. Photographs of the burning airship were censored, and the film reels hidden from the German public until after World War II. In 1938, the Zeppelin company completed one last ship, the LZ-130 Graf Zeppelin II, which performed several test flights filled with hydrogen. But commercial service was no longer possible. As war clouds gathered, the Graf Zeppelin II was absorbed into the Luftwaffe. In 1939, it even flew along the Polish frontier, attempting, unsuccessfully, to detect Britain's new chain-home radar system. When World War II began that September, the age of Zeppelins was truly over. The Nazi regime did not spare these Zeppelins either. Within a year, under orders from Hermann Göring, the remaining 2 Graf Zeppelins were dismantled for scrap. The vast Zeppelin hangars in Frankfurt were demolished, their aluminum frames melted down to build German warplanes. After nearly 40 years of wonder, the era of the great airships came to an end, tragic, inevitable, and final. The Hindenburg disaster shifted the course of aviation forever. The future now belonged to heavier than air airplanes, which were faster, more efficient, and, most importantly, safer. Zeppelin's only remaining advantage, their serene comfort, could no longer outweigh the fear. And yet, the dream never fully died. No one ever again built an airship on the scale of the Hindenburg, but smaller non-rigid blimps survived, used for advertising, surveillance, and spectacle. From the 1960s onward, the Goodyear blimps drifting above sporting events became humble descendants of that vanished age. In Germany, the Zeppelin legacy lived on. In the 90s, engineers developed the Zeppelin NT, a modern, helium-filled craft for tourism. Since 2001, visitors have once again drifted over Friedrichshafen, gazing down from the skies once ruled by giants. Still, nothing could match the splendor or the tragedy of the 1930s. The Zeppelins had embodied a vision born of the Belle Epoque. They carried war, then peace, and finally, catastrophe. Theirs was one of humanity's first grand experiments in conquering the sky. When Herbert Morrison cried out, his words captured more than grief. They became the epitaph for an age. The rise and fall of the Zeppelins remain a testament to both human ambition and fragility. A reminder that every leap toward the sky carries within it the shadow of the fall.